Namo Guru Be Namo Buddhaya Namo Dharamaya Namo Sanghaya Namo Namo Buddhaya Namo Dharmaya Namo Sanghaya Namo Gurube Namo Namo Dharmaya Namo Sanghaya Kande Lai Jie Guen Jie Do Gane Ra Gai Sho Zang Pon Jie Chon Zin Xue Yin Jia Bo Guen Jie Lo Zang Zhang Se nan Jie Ba Ni Di Xie Zo So Di Jie Nan Gan Se Jie Be Di Di Jie Zhe La Ma Jie Be Zong Gan Ta Lo De Be Se Na Xian Zhong Du De Ba Jie Jie Ge Ya Shu So So Xie Jie Zhen Guen Ja Be Lo Ge San Na Be Jie Ju Le Xie So Cha Be Be Jie La Me Ze Be Gu Tong De Jian Be De De La Ye Wo Jie Ye Na Zo Me Do Da Jie Xin Do Be Na Se Jie Jai So我上一只只真假，是那些中就来去不必看见多面就那三百一。六爱也也没个结结吧，结 Tewa Tenpa Chochen Benzon Zonjo Nen Traje Ten Yang Ten 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 Le Jo Sa Che Benje Chochen Mendo Zhang Re Ra Benje Nin De Sanje Yin Do Mi De Wi Wa Yi Zhou Gen Nan Da Xin La Jue Wa Jo Ye Dang Ma Gu Ru Ran Na Ma De La Ne Ya Da Ya Mi San Je Xue Da Zo Je Zhong Na La Jiang Zhou Ba Du Da Ni Jiang Zhu Da Ge Qu Ju Ren Ji Ben Tong Nang Ji Zhong La Ben Je San Je Zhou Ba Ra Xiu San Je Xiu Da Zo Je Zhong Na La Jiang Zhou Ba Du Da Ni Jiang Zhu Xue Da Ge Qu Je Zhou La Ben Je San Zhou Ba Ra Xiu San Je Xiu Da Zo Je Shang Xiu Ba Du Da Ni Jia Zu Xie Da Ge Xuan Nian Jie San Zhou La Ben Je San Je Zhou Ba Ra Xiu Kang Ge Ya Du Be Ni Re Sun Ne Da Ba Ben Je Ba Me Je Re Dam Be Shu Ne Dam De Be Ko Dam De La Cha De Lo Kang Ge Ya Du Be Ni Re Sun Ne Da Ba Ben Je Ba Me Je Re Dam Be Shu Ne Dam Ko Dam De La Cha De Lo Kang Ge Du Be Ni Re Sun Ne Dam Be Shu Ne Dam Be Shu Ne Dam De Be Ko Dam De La Cha De Lo 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 Ở ta tiền ta cái này ta cái này dễ dễ chút ở ta cảm giác làm đến什么ta cảm thấy giáo viên xong rồi tham gia nhẹ được ba 창조 làm gì trên ba 약간 세 거다 막연 심지 탐지 톱잘라나 매바 양답을 소비 창조주 렘보지 찌다는 게 톱을 자 뒤톱을 잡이 싫도 아니 비게지 자위 송을 탐지지 내도 봐 창조 남지를 봐 남릉 좀 세냠베 아니 공공 군주지는 반난 레퍼 세탑 셈버 휴스 Let us cultivate bodhicitta motivation or the altruistic motivation seeking complete enlightenment for the sake of all other sentient beings. And with that kind of motivation, we should participate in this Lamrim teaching, the great treatise on the stages of path to enlightenment that integrates all the essential points of practice.
Oh yeah, 다 간 temperature 추니 당가란도 뒤봐. 활동 제목 값이 된다. 그란로기 가장위디 값제. 한테네 마톤이다 단다. 가르치고요. 다 정도로 오래다. 지 롱디야 텐주와 반대 텐주와 란로기 애니 피에지 녀모 전남이야 두모 많이 봐. 세 대야 애니 피게지 공부르르리 파발하리 나와 작바리 되네야 상지 장리 효와 살을 속에 디 탐지기 디 세브리 센다 디마 휴사르 쿠시라바 다 디네야 가르다 디네 디 사르비 쿠시 다 디네 오리 다 디숭로나
We're back to volume number 3 in your English translation of this great treatise on the stage of the path enlightenment. The section that we have been dealing with is called section on special insight or vipassana, Hlakdong in Tibetan. And so within these sections, we have last time, talked about how do we, in our own system of thought, identify objects of negation or what is being refuted, and there's a unique perspective on understanding that. And that unique perspective really comes from Prasangika Madhyamika school of thought, the middle way school of thought, highest school of thought. And as I explained this before, that Prasangika has a unique understanding of afflictive emotions or delusions, klesha, that exist in our mind. And so this unique perspective has been accepted by many great realized Buddhist master scholars such as Arya Nagarjuna, and then his main disciple Aryadeva, and then also Chandrakirti, Buddhapalita, and great Bodhisattva Mahasattva Shantideva. So we have, so to speak, sampled works from all of these great treatises by these five great masters to substantiate the point or to understand that unique perspective on identifying object of negation and understanding afflictive emotions. Now, one thing that you all know well is how in Buddhism we talk about three yanas or three vehicles. There is Sharvaka yan or the hearer's vehicle, and then there is Pratika Buddha yan or the solitary realizer's vehicle, and then there is a Bodhisattva yan or the Bodhisattva vehicles. And in the Bodhisattva vehicles or the literatures, we find an array of rationales or the reasonings presented to establish what the ultimate reality is, the ultimate nature of things. And now the question is being raised, what about in the literatures of what we call the Theravadin yan? Well, maybe I think that's the politically correct term these days. Or in the ancient literature, it says Hinayan. Okay, my first footnote. We didn't make that one up. But anyway, so what about in the literatures of the hearers and the solitary realizers? Do we find explanation or presentation of ultimate reality, ultimate nature of things? So that's a question being raised.
Tati shebdi yori sungu sarava tati sabinal dedoa. Rabji tube thamjor tus. Rabji tube thamjor timi ta todo de kasungu yarsana. Timi ya danu yorwa ta danu tikjen danu timi danu tinde kangi ine chawli na ya tongbani sinye de tensha tengris tenda kandere sana ta Gompolutu Debe Rapji Tube Tamjortu, anything did me was Rabji to be some to did me was. That carriage here, this has Tipa member, the tick of Caritana, Ali Tita Marta, churches and what. Tama Tiwanda would go in a touch, Tipa member, Matongi Tag, tick carry or a chair, receipt to wake up into the chair. Church Tipa Chimbo Shungluk. Shungluk, the Tomatambal and Jupan, yes, enough. That Tiwanda would go to what they Tiwanda. That rank teaching to look at Tombani table. Here, Tanson, Yimbina, Timmy, Tanu, the Tombani temper, the Kawakaba, you are a candy tangri, Sene, Tiwakuba, here, Tina. That runs that Chebaput, Chebaput of the Chavina, Chebaput, and Jerebush, sorry, that Che Himmel Jetta, that Machebo Chirangi, Tindi, here, songs, Tijan, in Bayan, and do it any Tigbat and Tumbik. 년도기 택받던 tumbe 따와던 tumbe기 NPG 너디 탈았대네 다베 넘버 미시바 동지 다디 디와치여봐 아 동한테 동로나 팀메기 때누레 팀이 때누레 팀이라 NPG 이제 동탐바 가르치고 동탐바 다 동이 따와디 비지 때네 다 히어로 지신 티브리스 다디 레는 데리해 봐스 다디 다 저부실래 자위 서바다 레디 지난기 대화티 야구시란도 팀이 때문에 동반이 때문에 요아리 요버디 땅에 랍기니 간데 뚝세나 데베 두는 중시당 아니 가르사 데베 두는 중시당 시수 송변나 왔다 틱테리샤다 팀에레야 통탐바토야 틱테리인도와 내가 직직마도 메도디 희소세도 왔다 그 가로지 여러와 제단 도대 직쟁 너 임발라야 딘도 직기베 팀이 너 요버딘데 여리 아다 뭐 딘데 손다다 너디 가리나 팀이 너 인지로다 팀이 너 온데잖아 중에 뒤는 중 버다 데베 뒤는 중시단 희소 송도 희소 송바 인자 에네 가르사 송바나 어다 티파트 송로나 희소 송 스타디 되게 말해 그 가로지 서바 희소 세도 속에 나라 야 로야지 가로지 구여와 이 희소 송여레스 되게 가르타는 팀에라 동 담바댐 받디 팀에라 단지 동반이 댐 받디 세기도 진 직송도가 올라서
Okay, I'm trying to find the right passage. Anybody has got a better mark? 210? Okay.
Rabbinya took palace, yes, to
No. Okay. Yeah. Okay, thank you. Somewhere in the middle of 210. So the question that has been raised is, yes, in the Mahayana literatures, there are a lot of reasonings being presented to explain and establish what the ultimate reality is. Now, what about in the literatures of Sharvakayan and Pratyekabuddhayan? Is there any explanation about that? And so in the middle of page 210, you can see the question says, you have already explained entry into the ultimate through the Mahayana text. Now explain entry into the ultimate through the text of Sharvakas or the hearers. And so in the response it says it comes from the fundamental treatise of Mulya Madhyamika of Arya Nagarjuna in chapter 26. So there is a partial quotation. Through obscuration by ignorance, cyclic existence recurs, and so on. So that passage is presented. Sometimes what happens is in the Mahayana text there are certain sutras quoted, which also really apply to the sutras in the other yanas, Sharvakayans and Pratyekabuddhayan.
Oh, DJ. That in the tick sungdoga.
No.
David and Jungshita, she's so sung yours. Timile, Tombani, thank you, Tindegi Tembati, Tindeg that Tembati, Papa Yase Gang, Jene, kamdir karsana lobon sanje jangji jang sedwa de korenal peje korenal lobon sanje jangji jang yala chungni je thangbo marikpa ngobola ranshen tondokbala tondokba heba ta nyarangla choje tamin tokbar hebara selo sertati segita karesana tati lobon kartin dikab karsiyarsan lobon nipke sanje jangjaya yala chungni jangdo gita 저기 기부 등게 값이 체기라와 양라 중니지 거는 과거지도 마셰기라와 디체 운디 발다 양라 중니지 토메 머리고 니데 전에 거기 싸와지기 머리고 전에인다 디 머리 빠티 이니 다 간지 그다 오만 남지 야 초기 단디도 되발 근데 여러 봤다 디 감들이 초기 단디도 누구 말이 디 맞추다니 맞다 가서 시집도 그 말에 뇽립리스 뇽립 임바선다 녀랑 박베기 뇽립 막방 발라 파과지 용트비야 요 말이스 다좀 같은 게 뇽립 빵고리스 제가 인사티 디 양라 중니지 디 뇽립 뇽몬cen지 말이 디 말이 빠데 뇽립 인사 다디 녀랑 박박게 엔티 빵고도 양라 중니 말이빠 코레 진례점도 가르잖아 다 돈도 다 챙겨받아 시 망보 시 살아라 돈도 근데다 돈도 이게 날래 뭐뭐 매버직이야 이거 봐 줬다 매버직이야 이거 줬다니 아니 제땡게지리 디 현유부터요 말이 디 현유 매버 깐 현유 매버 그때 똥반이들이 디와리 시니 세기도가 돈도 봐 해봤다 녀랑라 취지 다음에 또 봐 해봐 셀로 저다디 주된티 텐데지 송다 양라 존이 투메 마리빠데 녀몽체지 뇽듭티니 디바 송다 녀랑 자좀 발라 아니 피게지 취지 다음에 또 봐 대야 아니 디 해봐도 디 두근도 셴네 송샤스.
So that quote is followed by a quote from Buddha Palita towards the end of the page 210, and so where the statement that Khensur Rinpoche has given commentary on reads, these statements make it clear that the Master Buddha Palita also asserts that the ignorance, which is the first of the 12 factors of dependent arising, is the superimposition of intrinsic nature on things, and that even Shirvakas and the Pratyukas Buddha know the selflessness of others, unquote, right? So that explanation from Buddha Palita. Buddha Palita is one of the greatest masters of the Prasangika school, and so he says that as a matter of fact, selflessness, sometimes we use the word emptiness, that is really presented in the other vehicles, Sharvakas and Pratyeka Buddha vehicles. And so the passage quoted, has a reference to that in the context of intermediate level of practitioners, right, with the small and the intermediate and the advanced, or however we're going to look at, the initial and the intermediate and the advanced. In the intermediate level practitioners, at that level, there is explanation of what called a chain of 12 links of 12 dependent origination, and that explains how we enter into samsara and then how we get stuck in samsara. Yeah? And when we look at that chain of 12 interdependent links, the first link is called avidya or ignorance, marikpa in Tibetan, right? Not seeing, literally. Yeah. And so, of course, there are different ways to understand what ignorance is. What does it really refer to? And I think in certain texts of lower vehicles, they say, sometimes they think that so the certain explanation of ignorance they think is a part of obscuration to omniscience. Okay, because there is the presentation of the two types of mental obscuration. Obscuration to nirvana, liberation, and obscuration to the omniscience. Okay, those are two different types of mental obscuration. So we do find different understanding, explanation of what is obscuration to omniscient state of enlightenment. Okay, so what is considered as obscuration to omniscience in the lower schools of thought actually is obscuration to nirvana according to higher schools of thought. Okay? And so we have to keep that in mind. And so that ignorance is identified as the root cause of our being in samsara or cyclic existence. And what is the nature of that ignorance? The answer is it is a superimposition. It is a fabrication, right? We can talk about all kinds of fabrications. Something that doesn't exist, we think it exists. Okay, that's what we call superimposition. Or we might fabricate that something that exists, we deny its existence. That is what we call underestimation. So the nature of ignorance, which is the first link of interdependent origination, is a superimposition of the kind that something doesn't exist, but we fabricate it to exist, and then we buy into our own fabrications. And we think, everything exists intrinsically, right? And that's how we goofed on this one. So because, so if you really look at what is really being fabricated by our mind, and does that object, we call the reference object, technical term, shenyul in Tibetan, what we are clinging to, does that object really exist? If we analyze it, it doesn't exist. It couldn't exist because with our figment of imagination, we just made it all up. Something that doesn't exist, we said it exists, and then we just got clingy about it. Okay? But once we analyze that, and we know that it doesn't exist, the absence of that reference object itself is the emptiness. It is the ultimate reality. Okay? So when we find that the reference object does not exist, we just made it all up, that absence itself, that non-existence of that object is the ultimate nature of things. And it is a must for any individual to realize that, to be free from samsara. Okay? So therefore, the primary goal of the intermediate level practitioners is to be free from samsara, right? To find nirvana. So in order to find nirvana or actualize it, it is a must that practitioners get rid of that ignorance from their mind. The only way they can get rid of that ignorance from their mind is only if they realize the selflessness of phenomena, or they realize that emptiness. So therefore, in the literatures of Shervakas and Patika Buddhas, there is explanation about emptiness or selflessness. No.
I would today rabji to be tamjor the tongi to you the marik give sing cherse ashdoa. Oh, titi, chiche. Correct, corretana, marik sing take it, tiba take it, Yansi, later Yomogi, Yansi, Chema, Anikawa, Java, Unity, no band of the Kenya, Langri, something rava, took the rabji to be tamjor to 다 단징에 해야지 점자하자면 랍지 준비 탐조를 중앙에 가서 그랬다 대선도 내배 뒤는 중시 다세야 직도가라 어 뒤니부터 다 통다 직발이 다 내배 대 가르치기 어떤 대갑라 내배 중단 중시 철새야 대갑래야 아니 그게지 다쳐보시고 기억이 살아봤다 따와한다고 따와 땅에 죽지 않는다 대갑내 때문에 따와 때문에 따와 주죽돼야 되는데 얘기도 와 따와 주죽돼야 돼. 다 간제시한테 따왕님 봐. 나 대베 나 집에 랑게 튕기 줘봐. 맥제라 봐다. 나 비게 자왕가말 나아 비게 이니 인디레지 류래 야세 대베 뒤셔야 돼. 랑 다달 뒤데 나 자왕가마 라게 뒤에다 시작하는 니레스는 야세야 봐. 야 단대자와 시작하는 나 마음 붙을래 아니 종 니레진 종사리 있잖아. 야지 수도 주반을 볼 텐데 제버디 아니 다 따왕님 바리 다 돌티는 또 관계 레레데 교 뭐가 제텔 뭔지 탈 땜바 치매 탈 땜바 망고 요르든 뭐가 제봐 갈체르잖아 따왕님 바 대다 탐제디 다 간지 시에도 마시나 딩 고그리 땅에 두지다니 고그리 갈체는 따왕님 바 탐제 고지 되듯이 다 가르치에도 마시나 곰불루도 그 맞댐베 다 된 나와 저거 그 맞댐베 갈체나 오메 릭바 찍기 정도 배 탐지 고도 그리스 같은 다와트 간데 쓰면서 땡중 대질 땡중 릭바 디네 땅에 잡아 타다 쥐버지 세네 따왕년 바다 진 가리기네 이 관계 배 대기 배 대도 그리스 바다 가이 땡중 릭바 찍기야 따왕년 바 탐지도 마 점도 그리스 송도가 어디 주야직 디제야 디파리테야.
So we're on page 210 in volume number 3 of English translation. So if we take together that passage quoted from chapter 26 of the fundamental treatise, Mula Madhyamika, and chapter 27, which is cited down below, then we can really understand that selflessness or ultimate reality, as a matter of fact, is presented in the literatures of Shervakas and Pathika Buddhas. Yeah? And as Khensur Rinpoche has explained, that ignorance is that which obscures our mind from seeing reality as it is. Yeah? So due to that ignorance, under the influence of that ignorance, we create all kinds of karmic actions, good, bad, and I want to say the evil, but there's no such thing, but good and bad, and neither. And then these karmic actions deposit their imprints on our consciousness, and then our consciousness carries those imprints, they get activated, and then we take some rebirth, right? We have to take a rebirth. So that's how we go round and round in samsara, starting with ignorance, and creating karmic formation, and then getting it activated on our consciousness, and we take all kinds of rebirths. So we have been doing this for so long, as we discussed before, that we ourselves don't realize our own superimposition of intrinsic reality onto things. We wholeheartedly believe in that our own creations. We even don't realize how we created it. And that ignorance, it starts all the chains, and that's how we come into samsara, and that's how we are going round and round in samsara. And so relating to that ignorance, in the Buddhist literature, sometimes we can talk about all different types of distorted views, okay, or the extreme views. And sometimes the list is as long as like 62 distorted views, Sometimes we talk about like 16 distorted views, whatever. But basically, all of those things are related to that basic ignorance, superimposing intrinsic reality onto things. So therefore, then if you look at the specific situations, there's cases like, oh, in the past, I was so and so. But as we remember our past, whatever that so and so is, we have attributed the intrinsic reality to that. So we kind of, in our mind, think that I existed intrinsically in the past, right? And then we speculate what might happen in the future, that I may do this and this in the future. Then again, in the process of that speculation, we attribute intrinsic reality into the future. So by doing these things, we buy into these distorted views, perceptions in our mind. Okay? And that's how samsara thrives, So in order to break that samsaric chain, so it's important for us to counteract that basic ignorance, superimposition. And so the real antidote to that is the realizing selflessness or emptiness as it is. And it has been presented, most excellently by Arya Nagarjuna and other masters that we quoted. Okay. As Chandrakirti's work was quoted, earlier, somewhere it says, one of the best ways to realize the ultimate nature of phenomena is through the reasoning of dependent arising. Right? The Sanskrit term is called pratit samutpat. And in Tibetan, we say tendel, right? Now probably, that maybe sound is ingrained in your mind somewhere. So one of the best reasons to establish, assert, access, whatever you want to call, the ultimate nature of things is through the reasoning of dependent arising. Because everything exists dependently. Everything arises dependently, which means nothing can stand on its own intrinsically in and of itself or from its own side. Okay? And that's what the Chandrakirti has presented in his works too. No.
Say last year, Talbon, Karinko, Lubon Sanje Jankita, Yaran Church Tami, top by any Hila, Martha, Hiba Segitus.
No.
I think they send to Juden Tindechena, Yaran Church Tami, top by Lumonta, Sanje Janki Hiba, Juden T, Chena. Yaran Churan Shime, but talk with Gypsy Chambuni. And the insecure, Tanyaran Ranchi. 가격이 냐랑 추지 담에 또 요 말이 지겨워 봐. 추지 담이 히드든 되게 로튼도게 냐랑 추지 담에 또 요 말이 지겨워 봐. 뭐 tendoki look the two my 봐. 예 히드드 미 히버 뇽드디 히버 왕기 냐랑 라 추지 담에 또 고요레스. 난 딜디 과 전부 쉬부쉬 살이됐다. number 2 longer 맞도 예 잡힌 게 민두 가르치는 데센도 냐랑 라 추랑 힘에 버터 똑베 줍지 전부 가르잖아. 체교 가르잖아. 딱 체교 주대 도도 마송 시대부터 도진 체교 가르잖아. 대송도. 최지 단지 양라 중이 머리과 줄어반 네 임버 시버 지시 제르부지 대송도. 다 가르잖아. 양라 최지 담이 또뭐 요때 최지 단지 양라 중이 머리과 네 임버 시버 지시도 자 거의 도구면도 가르송구이나 하고 그면도 딱 간제 시에는 마시나다 녀랑을 추랑 힘에 똑바 요아리 줍지 체쇼 줍지 첨분이 다 최지 단지 신이 되게 통매 머리배 양라 중이기야 꼴롱선에 면도 야 제제기 주선에 면도 야 징게데 최지 단지기 시리스 최지 단지기다 그 강사 단지기야 주선에다야 딘주야디 시기리 대송그 매로 다 이네 제가 남부도 하고 그러와 예송도와 야 또베 줍지 첨분이 저지 단데 야라 중이지 마르바 줄반 디 임버 아 간게 희고도 디 임버 희고도 다 제단 단디 저도 저지 단디 신이 되게 야라 중이지 토메 마르바 신이 되야 군이 롱지데 저지 단이 그또디 시치기도 디 인자 단 야랑 저지 담이 대 냐랑 빵고 요래 냐랑 대마밤 그러다 메다 냐랑 추지 담이 똑바 아니 비게지 가르타 말 마리바 임베 이베 치다 마리바 인다 냐랑 추지 담이 똑바 요아리 센타디 송구이 사레스
그래서 단다디 연락 중에 그 통매 마리바 다가나 추그 당진 레스고 말해
마리 추지 단디 들라다 다 니기라 봐
알차니에체
가사 임베 마리바 용치들이 초르미 그 마리바 요 되는 게 군은 롱진더부터 추지 단디기 신더부터 야 지기와레스 야 송구이 사레다
at the bottom, towards the bottom of page 210, statement reads, therefore, you should understand that the great proof for showing that Shravakas and Patika the Buddhas know that objects lack intrinsic nature is the fact that the conception of an objective self is counted as the ignorance that is among the 12 factors of dependent arising, unquote. So Khensur Rinpoche gives explanation on that, which is that I call it basic fundamental ignorance. Okay, the first link of links of interdependent origination. That's a whole lot to repeat 10 times. So easy in Tibetan, but anyway. So the first link is the ignorance, avidya, and that basic fundamental ignorance, it is a superimposition because, our mind superimposes intrinsic nature or reality onto persons and phenomena. And then we believe that's how things exist. According to some schools of thought, they think that ignorance is grasping at a self of phenomena, and grasping at self of phenomena is considered as obscuration to omniscient state. So therefore, they said that there cannot be explanation of how to get rid of that grasping in the literatures of Shravakas and Patika Buddhas. because their interest is to get out of samsara, not so much the Buddhahood. Are you with me? But according to Arya Nagarjuna and all the other masters we cited before, as well as Lama Tsongkhapa, they said no, that the ignorance, maybe has two parts, and that grasping at self or phenomena is still a delusive obscuration. It's an afflictive emotion. It is not an obscuration to omniscient wisdom. I know we're getting so technical here, right? You got to get that one right. Otherwise, nothing will make sense here. So according to Nagarjuna and other masters, Chandrakirti, Buddhapalita, Shantideva, all of them, they said that grasping at self or phenomena is a delusion, afflictive emotion. So therefore, the practitioners of the hearers and solitary realizers must get rid of that in order to find their nirvana. So if that's the case, then there should be explanation of how to get rid of that grasping. So therefore, there is explanation of selflessness of phenomena in the literatures of Shravakas and Patika Buddhas. And so as part of the explanation Khensur gave, which I try to sort of clarify that I really understood what he was saying, is that when we look at that fundamental ignorance, maybe it has two parts or aspects, if you will. Yeah? One is ignorance pertaining to the self of persons. The other is ignorance pertaining to the self of phenomena. So therefore, we talk about two types of graspings: grasping at the self of persons, grasping at self of phenomena. Yeah. Both graspings, according to Prasangika Madhyamikas, are delusions, afflictive emotions. So both graspings must be eradicated in order to attain nirvana. Yeah? And so therefore, in the literatures of Shravakas and Patika Buddhas, selflessness of phenomena is also presented and explained. Okay, so that's the position of our school of thought. Our means we are siding with Prasangikas, right? That's the assumption. Okay, when we say ours. Nons.
Oh yeah. Jevtanta Pani Tenyu di Lola that Icha Yorvata, Icha so the Satan to Ina, Icha so Mindrava Yudra, Lamatogi. Inbe Inayata, Pani Tenyu, Lung Delea, and Pigati, Yaran, Chura, him talk by touching to Tamjeki, Siri, and the Hirajude, that made the Siri. Inatera Tata Yanti, Catholic, Mindrava Chiglia, Kariartana, Pension Sona Trabe Sherina, Yarana, Chura, Himeba, Tokpa, Tonyo, Tapasene, Chagre Mado Chigla, Tope Tabasin, Jayama, Izakayanala, Tope Tabasin, Chadwa, Dinal Chadam, Tokyo Tapasin, Yarana, Chura, Himeba, Tonyo, Tapa, Sene. That Kani Champuja, Chetan Tenju, Toma Impi Dudu, Mangu Yori, the Ina Pond of Shara, Jerva, Yarana Churan Himeba Topa Yubi, Tonyo, Tapasin, Chowre, Penjanabuchi. The Garizan Tati, Yarana Churan Himeba Topasana, Yaran to be Tajumba in the Karina, Churan Himeba, Tobi, Toto, Tato, Himba, Toto, Hoku Yaris. Tonyo Tapasana, Yagushitari, Yaraki, Tongi Toba, Lanta Todoba, Chendi Kadu Yena, to watch it, Yaran Lagamango Yorvata, Sonyam Pico, Yorati, Karine, Sigurd to do Cabine, Tongi Tobi lotting on the Chujuziane, Pico, Marico, Tongi Tota, you told Yamba, the Yena, the lot, the Capi, Sonyam double pain, they said, lotting on the Chugu, Macheta Tonyo, Tapasin, so it is. That the tiny the Pitagio, Penitentiary. Then this and putting out of Gina, that Rima Tiny Robochin Tana, Dina the mitigate at the day was. Ali Dugumarve says on mitigate Dugumarvesana, no Dugumaris. That mitigate, that dead you can get the idiot, mitigate Mendos. And that mitigate Manon that hung this Pasaya, that me Nala Mendo. And I Pakangatuni Mendo, Mutashone Mendo, Namuri Mendo. This in the cover, the Tete with the Kani and Pigate, Montos Che Windivalta, Quanta which he has studied well. The Montos Che, 사와니네 만져와도 지기라 고용 여러와 아티 고 말이스 코란 드로잉 템죠 모타션 쪽에나 남리션 쪽에나 강바쪽 쪽에나 로베 자와 시신베 내가 별라 로스신 시기를 맞도 지기 대대를 qabla니 가자 로 말이 세상 똥이 또 힘베 내가 별라 똥이 또 시기를 맞도 지기 대냐라다 좀 정도 되게 잘해 라면다 여 정도 똥이 또 롱롱도 규규고 말이 똥이 또 녀에 잡았세네 자고래 센다 menrabanrabuche timbuche got dikhatuk de tinde yoris
So one of the things that Khensur Rinpoche would like us to take note of is that topics such as selflessness, it is very profound, and so great masters might look at it from many different perspectives. And so it's not necessary that there is a unanimity in terms of what it is among all kind of great scholars. And they might come up with different interpretations, understanding of what it is. Okay. Because when you look at the textbooks of monastic universities, because they are written by great scholars, so sometimes we find different explanations of the same thing, and then the monk scholars, they can choose to take which position, right? You have to defend your position, kind of thing. And so an example given here is that I think most of the monastic text authors accept that Shravakas and the Paticca Buddhas are capable of realizing what emptiness or selflessness is, okay, because this is explained in their text, because their goal is to find nirvana, and for that they need to get rid of the fundamental ignorance. Okay. But then, they debate about what do you mean by, realizing selflessness, and so some scholars, take it to mean that to realize selflessness means that realization must be manifestly present in your mind as of now, okay? And that's what realization is, whereas Penchen Sonang Dakpa, the author of the text book of Debung Loseling, he slightly differs from that. He rephrased it. No, I don't agree with that. Realization that has to be manifestly present in their mind as of now. I would accept that they are capable of realizing selflessness, and they could realize selflessness. Okay, so there's a difference between, because this has to do with how our cognitive perception works. Okay, many scholars say that if you realize something, it should be really fresh and present and manifestly there. Let's say if we say that Shravakas and Paticca Buddhas, they realize emptiness or selflessness, then it should be manifestly realizing as of now, okay, whatever emptiness is, isn't it? Whereas Penchen Sonang Dakpa says that doesn't have to be the case, because he thinks that maybe Shravakas are busy too. They're not like every time looking at the emptiness doing nothing. They need to travel, they need to do other things. So it's not like in every activity they do, they are manifestly realizing emptiness. Emptiness. Because they have to function. So he said, well, that is not working with me, kind of thing. Yes, I can accept that they can realize emptiness, they are capable of doing that, but it is not necessarily present in their mind 7-11. What was that? What's the expression? 27-7 or whatever that expression, Yes. So that's his take on the, I think I need to incorporate those modern things. So, yeah. So that's that kind of difference. So Khensur Rinpoche says, he started explaining this as best as he understands it well, but there could be other. We should allow for other interpretations as well, right? Nothing is fixed, here. Yeah. No.
Oh, yeah. That is to Tarasonga. Till you to Taraki, he said, good thing about it. He some Tagayati to a Sitapales. That is her secure senate, that is don't get the Yoravata, Petri. Shuluk in the Shuluk Raman, Mango Yorvata, Poo in a Poo Korenalia, and should you some his and a yondari, Timembeta, to one don't get Mango Mango, kept in the Ujiravata. Tunzu Karasior Santati, Tokbasinity, Tamja Gago does, not to Tokbasin door. Longosum sing check down, Tokbasin is door. Tokbasin, Sinazuti, check Tokbasinity, 기라 야부민도 그렇게 모두 전에네 쇼컨데직 통비네 지금 뭐좀도 통야 매된게 통지된 전에 야지 샤르공게지게 때 갑자기 가구도 다 간제 똑바 매버시 뭐좀 안들 요라 봤다 매게 옹봉어서 나의 전속기 가리네 유티 다가랑 통바체 통바난기 롱주야 안부터 가데 롱주기나 소소소게 되지 맹잡이나 속을 롱주다한테 봤지 나와도는 자년 봤다 몇년 봤다 근데 저도 롱주다 되게 자고로만도 저기라 똑바시 저기 마대고대 산도 가고 쉬우지 데 단티 야고 미도 파가고도 생겨야 죽다 열어봐 어디 봐 가게 열었다 대 가르치기 열었잖아 시작에 가르치기 열었 책대 똑바에 통화 치용 때 했다 대 가르치기 열었 똑바에 통화 치용 때 가르치기 열었잖아 똑바야 뒤 똑바 뒤 신질로 똑바 당 정도 덴진이 들이디 열었어 초 지금 맹네 코레트라 네제 매버직 대간래 좋다는 통바디 에네티 통한디 막 코알 막 친지기 줄을 맞도 지래 코알이야 타야기 탑기기 줄이 말에 있을 거야 칭칭도 맞다 코아나 말 유제남 코아마 치야기 줄이 진짜대 무슨소 똑베 통화 치용한테 디 똑바디 대인바 똑바 로키 다동들은 똑바 같이 들었잖아 가르치는 똑바 로키디 막 정도 똑바 단 덴디세야 딘바 어디 코알 마 친기리 진리기 되게 칭칭den게 똑바티 현유매반데 아니 되네 내를 갖고 차서 어다티 현유디 매바티 루진 청원의 진계기 똑바치도 와 되게 있다 현유매바세 똑바코라가 하잖아 여기 투도 봐장한테 주타래 봐 유나리 배 가메리 비서체네 휴타라고 왔지 똑바코라 바가 하자 말아봐 가야 대 현유 똑바코렌 진당 현유지 봐 감대로 아니게 가르쳐 갔다 가고 저거 이 가야 안 잡을때 뒤 감니 땜배기 아니 현유지 가고 저거를 맞도 똑바 인제 가고 말해야지 송비 아래스 맨도 좀 잡아 나는 대가 저거 봐
Khensur is having a lot of fun trying to interpret all that. So at the bottom of page 210 over to page 211, it reads, Arya Deva's 400 stanzas or Chatuk Shadak, Shibkyapa in Tibetan, states, conceptuality cease and you are bound. It should be stopped here, unquote. So what does that mean? Conceptuality cease and you are bound. Okay, and so some schools of thought, they really take it to mean literally every kind of conceptual thought. Okay, so therefore they feel that we must stop thinking completely because this is what it says: conceptuality cease and you're bound. I don't want to be bound, right? That's their rationale. And as Khensur mentioned that. For example, what you call Tibetan Buddhism, right? I said what you call, because we never said Tibetan Buddhism. There are at least 4 major traditions. We have Nyingma, Sakya, Kagyu, and Gelug, right? And we might find different explanations, positions. So it is possible that in certain traditions, somebody might take it literally, meaning that we must stop every kind of conceptual thoughts, otherwise they bind you. Who wants to be bound, right? Okay. But that's not the really real understanding of what this statement means by Aryadeva. First, to understand that, as Khensur explains, the cognitive world, our world of perception experience is really vast, isn't it? We have all kinds of perceptions. For example, often we talk about musum, right? Direct perceptions. Yeah, then we talk about conceptual perceptions, Dakpa. So these cognitive processes, they work differently. Okay? Yes, they're all cognitive states of mind, but they're not one and the same thing, how they engage with their objects, if you will. Okay? Direct perceptions, they see their objects without any intermediaries, right? Without anything coming in between, they see as it is. For example, our eye consciousness, as we put, it sees beautiful, ugly, whatever objects as directly. There is nothing that how should I say, mediates the perception between them. Okay, and so is the case with our auditory consciousness. It hears good, bad, and all kinds of sounds, and there's nothing that mediates the relationship between our direct auditory perception and its objects. But conceptual perceptions are different. Okay, they don't see their objects directly and nakedly and unconceptually. They see it through the images of the objects. And the technical term we use is called the generic image, Tenzin in Tibetan. Right? Conceptual thought perception engages its object, but it sees its object in the image, its own image. So there's like this, what called something intermediary here, right? The image of the object comes between your perception and the object itself. Yeah, and so that's how all conceptual perceptions are, if you will. And so the statement here does not mean that we should stop every kind of conceptual perceptions, because there are conceptual perceptions we need to cultivate. As a matter of fact, we need to nurture them, we need to further them. Okay, what it really means here is that distorted conceptual perceptions must be stopped, otherwise they bind you. Okay? And it primarily refers to our grasping at self. Our grasping at self is a conceptual state of mind. Okay? And so that grasping is a distorted conceptual state of mind. And it must be stopped because why? It sees the self as intrinsically existent, which is a distortion, our own superimposition. And because of this distortion, we are bound in samsara. That's how we're stuck in samsara. So that needs to be stopped. That needs to be eliminated. Not all kinds of conceptual thought processes. So that's the really, the explanation here. Let me see. Because, as we discussed this another day, that if something exists, we have to respect its existence. We cannot deny its existence, because that's against the reasoning and law of nature, isn't it? If something exists, we just acknowledge that it exists. We just can't go against what really exists and deny its existence. So conceptual thought processes, many of them, they do exist, so we cannot simply deny their existence and stop them from arising. No.
어디세? 다 똑바까지 다다디 까야디 똑베 통화 치와디 되는 대로 갖고 자세하게 똑바들이 마도 똑바들이 마도 똑바 관계 말해. 시송베 똑바가 센도관디 맞아 그래 날도가 시송베 똑바 간이 탐제를 제법 많이지 똑바 탐제를 지겨 말해. 똑베 통화 치와 대시 감는 때문에 인디게 똑바 되게 현유 가 똑바 가 세는 지겨 마도 똑바 간이 가 지겨 말해지. 많이 지제. 아 맞아 그래 누가디 대오도 세버리시도가 아하 최단라 랑경고 도바 돈독베 똑바 니데 똑베 청아 나서 똑베 통화 청아 대시비 똑바 간디에지 안다디 간디 럽도 휴타라 봐 휴타라에 되네 마 세버리 송도가다 최단라 지나 지다 나게 최 간디지 임베야 디토라 랑경고 도비와 말했디 랑경고 도바 돈독베 되네 근데 그 똑바들이 센데 갑자기 어디 문제 대남빈바 그거 어디 쓰기요래 어다 다 뒤직 바라봐 뒤직 뒤바지 문제 되나 단디 시답에 송들어와 다시 뒤 대발리 가르 송되잖아 다마 휴전 뒤직 바라봐 그런 뒤 대발리 가르시엔 되잖아 똑바니 야탁바 마인베 라히지 아니 가자 돈독바 때 시송지 똑바 세야지 NPG 양타벌 좀 매봐 그라 라히지 NPG 두바 매발 라히지 두바 돈독바 똑바 대신에 와티 시송지 어다티 주로나 어다티 세보르 오도와 대하고 만디 당에.
So, bottom of page 210 to 211, it continues to read, even the conceptuality mentioned in that statement does not refer to all conceptual consciousnesses whatsoever, right? But rather to conceptual consciousness that superimpose essential existence on phenomena. Okay, so that's what it is. So the statement, which goes something like this: conceptuality cease and you are bound. It should be stopped here. This conceptuality should not be understood as meaning all kinds of conceptual consciousnesses or conceptual thoughts, as if we have to stop everything, thinking, right? Almost like knock out our consciousness. What it really means here is what kinds of conceptuality that need to be stopped. As we see on the top of page 211, conceptual consciousness that superimpose essential existence on phenomena, right? And we experience all kinds of phenomena. Sometimes we classify them into external phenomena and internal phenomena. Okay, internal phenomena, my second footnote, I believe, is phenomena conjoined with your consciousnesses, with your perceptions. Okay, so whether it is something that exists, externally, or it is something that is conjoined with our consciousnesses, we superimpose intrinsic reality onto that. Okay, so that conceptuality, it needs to be stopped, because that is that is the troublemaker. I'm not making it up. He said, that's the troublemaker. Yeah.
Oh, that is it. Yanjo trouble. He sung his. Today, talk by Tonga Chima, teach you talk about the career. Says on that. Huge terror. They answer it. They talk about they answer it. Talk about like Tondu Yore, Tom Mitumba Yore, and Ramin they talk about your cheta. Then they talk about they are no more changing Marik with Hipes. Talk about Tinder what the Karsarda, no more changing Marik by Hipes, Cheta Jamdoa.
No.
Hipe Yita, no more changing Marik by Hipe. Hipe today talk about the lot home into no more changing Marik by Hipe, Mato Chilla. 당아주 디날이 여러봐다 류 차시게 날이야다 요 디삼바리 다 들산인 디체고 난 디체고 니네 봐 루두기 제네 동시네 지네 봐 지네 줄 땡네 소소들 줄 땡야 이지러다 무tom마다 들 자비들을 줄 땡야도 상소야 한다부터 빠바만인가 줄 땡야도 어때나기 미싱이 된 남주기 양때 토와 인자 주 가로로 디네 봐로 tago shooting gravata kaji tago shooting grava that deo di tishul dichi lagachi ne tishul dichi and kedu dichi and chondo seni pa namju chik te chorata namju ke sirab ke te choraba what is yorba yomo ji sebe denen deo kan tokba tamje ji yur rikwe goparan dobanni himor matak pate Oti talk about the chin, talk about the say at the Yamonchen, Mariba Heber, Madoja, Maranzo, Tanta Shubinashi, did see some big talk about Yorata, talk about Yorba. Take Chicatena, never talk about Tamjeg, you repeat, that he talk about car, go do, she talk about Kangel with the Kaigadi, Ma Takia, my ship, better than gay, better Matabiki, Nelari. Pajata ne Karichinki in Shumlea, Yaku Matamuchi, some like Matamuchi, Yeleri Mato, then the Harihudin of the Shaver Mato, the Yaguchi May or Maris, the Monkey, Yaguchi, Mayo Maris in Sigitoa. Himor Matak Pay, Himor Matak Pao, Tali, or the Sumta.
So that meaning has also been clarified in Chandrakirti's commentary on Aryadeva's 400 stanzas, right on top of page 211. And then it says, further, he asserts that it is afflictive ignorance. Okay? So that superimposition, the basic ignorance, it is a delusion. It is an afflictive emotion, meaning it's not an obscuration to omniscient state, right? It is obscuration to nirvana. Okay? So as Khensur explained, so that statement, conceptuality sees you are bound, it should be stopped here. It does not mean we should stop all kinds of conceptual thoughts. Okay? Because there are, in the conceptual world, there are conceptual thoughts which are valid and which are helpful. And there are conceptual thoughts which are invalid, distorted, so these need to be fixed or get rid of. Yeah. Even our everyday experiences, as he says, even if we look at the animal world, well, they have some kind of a plan too. Look at the ants, how they build the ant hill. They have a plan, grand plan, how to build the ant hill. And we human beings are even smarter than many animals usually. That we have so many things going on in our head and mind, isn't it? We have whole plan. Okay, what should I do after the class finish, right? And then what next this evening, and maybe tomorrow, and maybe some of us thinking about going to live another 100 years or something. We have a whole plan. We are going to do that. So that planning is not necessarily wrong. See that? Because as long as it's based upon good plan, critical intelligence use, and thinking, and rational, and reasoning, and reasonableness, and that's good. But what helps us to do that is the conceptual thought processes, isn't it? If we stop all of those things, then we can't plan anything. See? So the statement should not be read to mean that we have to stop all our critical intelligence and all the conceptual thought processes. It simply means that we should stop this superimposition, conceptual consciousness that that fabricates the intrinsic reality and superimpose it onto things, and then we get caught up in that conceptual framework. That need to be stopped. No.
Oh yeah. Teaching that is it was a matter for wash. That member che, today Tandaki Bahijabi ma Gongwa ma current here about the ma Lamdon of the ma now, today my talk what time you got you sana? Yang Yoti Utu talk what time you got you sana? That can dig it, Sharon talk what time you can't dig it, Kayo Marita don't talk about him today. Gago injury. In any social juice in it. Palam Matobe. Tonum that in a Lama Yorba. Tonum Toban and Melolam Tella, Pagbe Lamsi Yorba, Pagpaya Pani, Susu Sally and Denia, Pagbatala, Pagpa. So time tell Majapke that Tolamina, Jolamina, to look up again, so you. So lam mato be so you changi devare. Lam tobe on the channel, ye capsula, Kojur Gichu in the top of your hit your maris, Chiwati Tati. Tobaka gonna Kojur Gichu in it, Togana, Kadisin dog race, Togbe Toba Matola, Tombani Rabishayana Lamsong or some to get away, Lamachu, Tombani wants to Tobani your mari. This in a mat to get away. So you get a Carisian machine, Tongbani say a loss of meta or loss of the Takanje, Kojurgichu, Kaim, but Tobati, Yotame, say actively do what? What this good to that? This good demand or some. Tati Akval Rosok Diamanda. Yamato, Teta Manas and what? Teta Manas so you take on you cook the jury, Tongbani, Ton top and Membe. I am about maybe in that. Don't buy member any and Zimbe Tamne Mela. Go you don't buy talk about Tamjane Pagatari, Taco you Sudo Imba. Lama should the society to get don't buy yet and metabols of Mosum to toss again bear, Tamu Corner Mosum toss again bear sene. Don't buy the Tobe Tobatia, coming Mosum Moya, Nature Mosum Gimokin, Tarchim. But Tanguni Mosum to toss again bear sene. Till you do what there? What till you do? So that you got to give a Tombani, don't talk with Membe. Anita, Zimbe Tamne, Mela. Tombani thing the uni, Metabi, go you with the uni. That is Tombani me. And then Monsum get the Lamsad, to Zimbe Tamne, Melas. Oh, sir. They may be in Tanda, Toba Kani Tamje, Yula, Ribe, Nuna. Yanki, Yulia, Tribe, Loki, and Ranchi trot of Tar Juro. Ramata dog is top by Inenda, Tony Tunji top by Inenda, to can't get there, any Tobe Chion, Tobe Ton and Chion test in Tandaya, so Yabina, and that the condition you're going to Kerang Lula. Toba can get Kabi in the time that you talk about Tony to talk about last talk with Tundu can get Tobe Ton and Chion test in it. He come to them to Toba can get Chipa Sushi. She was so in and men Toba can get Kabi, that day, any PhD, Cassandra. Tobe you can get any PhD, Loki, Loki race and Tindes, Mark over jurgudu, tan jurgudu se de wala, tinde chena te yungri se achi sungi saraba.
No.
Oh, laso.
No. So, the second paragraph from the top on page 211, so Khensur Rinpoche explains that paragraph, what's stated in that paragraph. So, it's like we're having a dialogue or conversation with, those, who assert that every conceptual thought, perception processes must be stopped. Okay, that's how they take it to mean. Okay, then we say, okay, let's really, talk about this a little more with a cool head. Okay, here's the. Let's ask you this. If you mean that every conceptual thought, perception must be stopped. Okay, let's take. We'll work with that one, right? We just take it to mean that. Okay, then, do you accept that there are phenomena which are hidden, we call concealed phenomena? They depend on what is sculpture, right? Sometimes we classify phenomena into manifest phenomena and concealed or hidden phenomena. That's something we cannot access directly, right? So do you guys accept something we call hidden phenomena or concealed phenomena, for lack of better words in English, Okay. So, of course, they have to say, yes, we accept there are things you don't see directly, but they do exist, right? Then how do we know they exist, right? We can't access them directly, so how do we know that this hidden phenomena exists? The only way we know that is through reasoning, and reasoning involves conceptual thought processes, isn't it? Okay, let's say, for example, take emptiness as a case in point, okay? Ordinary sentient beings or people like us, we are ordinary because we do not have direct perception of ultimate nature of things as it is, isn't it? Whereas Aryas or the transcendental beings are those, who have, direct experience and perception of ultimate nature of things. That's how we divide it up, right? We are ordinary because we don't see the reality as it is. Whereas the transcendental beings are Aryas because they see as it is. Okay, that's the big difference between us. Okay, so which means, so is there a possibility that for us ordinary people to be able to understand emptiness or not? Because we don't see it directly. We couldn't see it directly. That's why we're ordinary. So how do we understand it? How do we realize it in the beginning, emptiness? We have to realize it through conceptual thought processes, isn't it? We have to reason it all out, right? So when we use rationale to be able to understand that something exists like emptiness, so our first understanding and access to that reality is through thought processes. Okay? So once we have a correct conceptual understanding of emptiness, then through meditation, it is as if we peel off these layers of conceptuality, isn't it? Okay? Then we slowly transform that conceptual understanding into direct experience, yogic direct experience. That transforms into. Now we see emptiness non-conceptual as it is. So in order to get there, we have to go through the thought processes, isn't it? Okay. So that means we can stop that. If we stop that, then we will never going to realize emptiness, Or you have to claim that our conceptual understanding of emptiness is a distorted perception because, we are not supposed to see it. So it's not making sense, even when we try to reason it out, right? Or take another topic example, impermanence, subtle impermanence. You and I don't realize what it is. The only way we can access that hidden phenomenon is through reasoning, through, right, thinking that there is such thing as subtle impermanence. So that conceptual thought, as a matter of fact, is a very useful thing, isn't it? If we stop that, we stop the conceptual understanding of subtle impermanence, we stop the conceptual understanding of emptiness, well, then what are we going to do? We will never be able to, get out of samsara, for that matter. So therefore, it goes against the reasoning and our experiences to say that all conceptual thought processes must be stopped. Okay? And that's why, going back to that statement, which reads, conceptuality sees you are bound, it should be stopped here. It does not mean every conceptual thought. If it were, then we are in a big trouble. Then we say, While conceptual realization of emptiness, it sees, it binds you. Stop it. Does it really make any sense now, right? Or the conceptual understanding of subtle impermanence sees, you're bound, stop it here, right? It's not making any sense as we plug it in, all this valid conceptual. So therefore, we must understand it in the right way, which means that not every concept conceptuality need to be stopped, but it's a particular kind, the distorted ones, if you will. And among the distorted ones, the real culprit is our superimposition, grasping at the self of phenomena. So with that, considerable thought, we had enough excitement, so we can stop there today, and we yield our floor to you. Please ask your questions, or make observations, or yeah, it is on, I think.
Rinpoche, please comment about the differences between the obscuration to audition and that of the Nibbana.
Sure. This session arona sa da dandang anzo timni shago orwa nyundip da shidip sen orwa din yigi kebar kande se che ore sa da no
ali that this is one kati yigi tune tibani shago wa lamgi tibasi ni chikta 가자 돈도 다 디바르다 다 더도 현은 마시나 뇽립 자자가자 뇽립 진예티 단다 시에대야 도도 관계 뇽립제 시베차 강인바데 뇽모 그렇게 시베차 다든 림바 라서부터 뇽립제라 봐라 다디 샤베 바자 저봐 시듭 진예테 디 샤베 바자 냠바 나도 뿐러부지나 팀망 냠바지 이티라부지나 디 도도디 바똥 사르제라 봐 얘네야 티슈프디나 티마즈 하디기도 와. 티도도 되게 티마디데 카야디 하디기도 와. 요 티제비인다 될라 시제디 바스기래. 난 텐주와 차샤나 다tun도 쟁여라 다좀부터도 티 티마칸게 뇽베 뇽이롭게 릭타다데 반사르지. 임베이나야 티 샥베게네 제 여러 바다. 나돌라 제 네년련다부지 이 티마다부지 어 될라 시제디 바스기래. 다티 세운도 남기 빠인디 빠나 에디스체는 빠인디 사줄람가야 자인디 사탕분이 듬베 팔라 다지 자 당분이네 디게라는 쇼된게 야니랑 다중원도 소마지 니 용거 알아 봐. 그 당분이네 쇼된게 되게 답좀만 면제라 단단히 용집지야 빵고야. 드네 쿠사 제반에 다티 뇽집스니 되게 샤베 티마티 다 반사 제바 고바 주바스니 인데센 반에 드네 다 팀니 차타와 반된게지 야들리스데 산제스니데 벤다 제바데 니 세발은 적베스다 산제스니데 왔다 드디 톰도 알다 도도도 붙이나 뒤니 켜반다부터 딘데스리스
Yes, we generally talk about two types of mental obscuration. One is called nyunti, delusive obscuration or just delusion. The other is called shedib, obscuration to knowledge. Okay? And the difference between the two is what we experience mostly in our everyday life, all kinds of afflictive emotions we experience are the obscuration to liberation. These are nyuntip delusions, okay? Even including grasping at the self of a person, grasping at the self of a phenomena, these are still delusions or afflictive emotions. Now, obscuration to knowledge are, understood as the latencies or the predispositions of delusions kept on our mind. They're more subtle, if you will. The example that Khensur has given is when we burn incense, right? The incense stick is being burned, we can smell it, we can see whatever. Once the incense stick is completely burned, there's nothing you can see, but still there's a smell. There's some, smell left. So like that, even when we have completely purified our mind of delusions, it is still possible that we could have the imprints of delusions on our mind, latencies. And this is the case with arahats or the arahants of Shirvakas and Patika Buddhas. They're completely liberated from samsara. They're completely free of the delusions or obscuration to nirvana, but they still have the imprints of the delusions on their mind, so they need to work. They are not Buddhas yet, right? When we say Buddha, a fully awakened being or enlightened being is someone who is completely free of both mental obscurations, obscuration to nirvana and obscuration to knowledge or enlightenment. So in the context of our structure of paths and spiritual grounds, right, from Mahayana point of view, we talk about 5 spiritual paths. From the path of accumulation to the path of no more learning, there are 5 paths. Between the path of seeing and the path of no more learning, we can talk about 10 spiritual grounds or bodhisattvas, right? The dasha bhumis, if you will. Okay? Now, assuming that someone has right from the beginning entered into the Mahayana path, okay, that's from the get-go, entered the Mahayana path. So while he or she is on the Mahayana path and progressing on the paths and grounds, from the first spiritual ground to the 7th spiritual ground, this practitioner is eliminating mostly the delusions. Okay? And on the 7th spiritual ground, you are completely free of delusions and afflictive emotions. Okay? Now, from the 8th to the 10th spiritual ground, there are 10, 8, 9, and 10, this practitioner is primarily working hard to be able to purify their mind of imprints of delusions, which are obscuration to knowledge. So once that is done, then they become on the 11th ground or whatever way we're going to talk about, he or she becomes a real Buddha. Okay? So that's the difference between the 2 types of mental obscurations. Now, in the case of someone who has really come to Mahayana from the Theravadin or the Sharvakayan, the story could be different, because maybe sometimes it's possible that somebody is completely free of the delusions, then enter the Mahayana path and then take it. So these are different, different way of entering into the Mahayana path. Okay. Behind you, yeah.
Now, here, Chandrakirti says a conceptual consciousness superimposes the incorrect sense of intrinsic existence.
Mm-hmm.
So this means, the way I understand it, is every conceptual consciousness superimposes that sense.
Okay.
Every, not so even positive thoughts. So why not take it literally, for example, and just keep in mind that after all, somebody who busies themselves with the affairs of this life, with planning and scheming and all that, which is presumably positive. But anyway, whoever busies themselves with these kind of things will never realize the emptiness of intrinsic existence.
Okay.
So it seems to me that he's conflating the goal, which is to stop all conceptuality, not only negative conceptuality, but all of it. That's the goal, realizing emptiness directly, with the method, which is to use conceptuality. So these are 2 different things, but he's not making it clear. Does that make sense? Yeah. The goal is to stop all, including positive conceptuality.
Okay. I got it. Yes. Korangi di shugudu. Da tanda delia kaza pande dawa takwa rwa. Tanda lungs tang rwa. Kaza da di tanda kaza tokbe gi en thong bar di ching bar sa jo rwa. Konasina ane tanda nganzo di tokba de kande jil ngunjin che di kabla ya ina ta chota ba tokba ngunjin che rwa. Kaza rangshin du ba chota ba tokba. So this is the kind of tokba ina rangshin du be chota ba tokba be chegu mar wes rwa. Di yi ba ina rwa. Chegu yo ba ina an tande 고아 디코나 라바니 시체마 지신라 바선 똑바 이나 아니 강가 까고야 차고로 가서 고런신 좀 줬다 그요로와 그러봐 세상 디지 시도 갈때 미규지 딱다래도 와서 가서 런신 좀 줘도 똑바 차상배 매서야 까고 그래서와 지금 말 배사디 고아네 미나
이게 말해 대개발 전부 추이 이게 대개발 맛이 똑바 관계 랑케지 되게 똑바 인센도네 아니 동이 던지 되게 똑바 대야 랑신지 주반데 똑바 인세 고요라다 개용야 요 말봐 빈이 미과 찍을 미빈당 무슨 개버라다 추 봄바다 보이나 까 미과 찍을 미빈당 무슨 개버 인자 이 분지 가서 그러자 동반이 던지 되게 똑바 대 아니 네 운도 봐라 위에 똑배 청아 가서 뒤에 투기때 똑배 통화 청아 됐어야 똑바디 가도 그니 너자니지 사대기 알아봐 미 미빠지를 미는 등당 온게로 사대기 알아봐 다 도도도 저는 똑바 강이디 라체지 들어간데 똑바 임비 차바 민두 차바 요만 똑바 통중 강이 버티게디 라체지 들어 똑바 말이 유코라 라체지 들니 매비다 매부지 유벌 뒀다 똑바디 말이 that means 카가리
hypothetically speaking, as you put it, if all conceptual thought processes we have, they do the same thing, superimposition of intrinsic reality onto things, then it really makes sense that we should stop, right, altogether. That should be our goal. But the fact is that every conceptual thought process that we experience is not necessarily superimposing intrinsic reality or fabricating that nature. Okay? And so therefore, in the case of looking at the same thing, emptiness, right, that we might grasp at the intrinsic reality of emptiness, which is the superimposition. But that superimposition can only be counteracted by another conceptual thought that sees just the opposite of it, that there is no intrinsic reality, isn't it? So we use that other conceptual thought as an antidote to cut through this other conceptual thought. So which shows that every conceptual thought is not necessarily a troublemaker or a problem, So that's why the conceptuality here really need to be understood in terms of a particular distorted conceptual thought, the superimposition.
Again, I didn't say that we should eliminate. To the contrary, I said the method is not to eliminate, but the goal is to eliminate. So just because every conceptual thought superimposes, according to Chandrakirti, intrinsic existence, doesn't mean that we should eliminate it, we should stop it right away, like Hwashang, in the Hwashang meditation.
Right.
We should use that, just like Rinpoche explained. So there is a difference between a goal and a method.
Right.
The method is to use the other conceptual...
The goal is to eliminate.
Yeah, the goal, though, is this is exactly what happens. After all, we realize emptiness directly, which means all conceptuality is eliminated. Okay?
그러면 this go the top down 미규의 상면에 와 먼저 미규의 단다디 라바디 참치 차금에도 스칸스네 가라다 또가 용서 매버스야지로 와 the 탑람디 베나다 단다 베나 또가 든든지 탑람 또는 또가 녀바데 세고로 와 이내다 가서 베나디로 다 거래 베디 샤송아 그래서 뭐지 베나다 가서 동반이 러버지 단다 당고 든지 수도 또 하나만 또요 말로 와 이제시지 다이나 그 미규조데 데려다 든지 수 또가 되게 이 맞으면 그 내종 무슨 유야기 터지세고도 서와 제대로 가고 똑바로 세고고 여자 니치고 말해서 나 미유조디 똑바 간가 배 매서야 말해서 거다 타메 미유디 탑람들라 똑바 비지치고 왔다 그 매서야지 타마들이야 똑바 간가 매서야 말해서 나
네 똑바 간게 매서 센다 소요 말이야 내종 무슨 야야야 사지 박배를 똑바 요 말아 똑바 되오 냠배기 예 사질래니 추저신도 매우 똑바가 말았어요. 똑바 짱이 요 말이. 디간디신 매브리잖아. 근데 똑바 대 야야야야 제내저는 무슨 뭐 제는 무슨 거야 제네 똑바티 매브리인들 봐. 제단 똑바티 근데 똑바 통주 단단히 가세야지 디 현유매봐. 또 고아 고지기 디 현유매봐 가야 될 얘기도 와. 마도 지금 똑바 통주 분디 똑바 가 그래. 다음에다 또 똑바 가 그래서 전에 또 가게요 말다. 이제 똑바 관계디야
무슨 주로 왔다.
가스니 코란파 주 독자래 또 독자래 디바 독자래 현재 관계자 요 말아. 코레 곰지 야게야 곰문 무슨 뭐 코레 침바라 마도 저기 똑바 가스니 이게 믹스에게 뒤 현유매가 가지 근데 징계자 요 말아. 단단히 또디 가르잖아. 뒤 현유매가 가야 들어봐. 믹스에게 뒤 코와 친지 뒤 매버서야 탑지라. 믹스에게 뒤 현유매가 가야 돼. 아니 똑바 탐지에 될 님피게지 제당 내정 무슨 뭐 이런 거 요아리 뒤 제비 인상 다뒤 똑바 칸제디 단다 딘나 이게 가비 탄인데 지금 말이
Khensur says that yes, I mean the way you differentiate it is that the goal is to stop all the conceptuality, but in the method process we may use some what we call the correct conceptual thought to cut through the other ones. That's explanation, right? He says that in what is it? When we look from the Buddhahood point of view, what we really see is that all our conceptual thought processes, eventually they transform into direct perceptions. So that's why we said Buddhas do not have conceptual thought process that we do. But that does not mean that we have to make efforts to stop every conceptual thought processes. That is not part of our process. He said, but by the time we become Buddha, right, everything becomes direct experiences by our development, spiritual. But we don't have to make that a goal. Yeah.
And there are many systems which advocate precisely that, right? Is that the case? That there are other schools which advocate precisely that, the stopping of all conceptuality.
Yeah.
Right.
So that di karsa gore tal di wa ngazen tuta da mana mangbo yora di da sheju da mana mangbo yungro wa khaje sidiu kala ya ta pena karsa ro da lodo ngiamba ge tokwa de ka ku gre se wa khaje ge toba ko yonso ka ku da ko deshe mangbo yungro wa so
ri de yungro yore tanda te tun tro da tokbe chwa thwa chwa te tel tuni ta tokba sinye ti ta ga yok ji ge ka ku do si ra wa ji si yora wa ya ta tel Rinpoche sana tindete ye matuk pates sedwa ye matuk be tari matuk chile yago hipro chen yago tari na tinde siyo mares tara meeting Rinpoche ge thoban Rinpoche ge meeting tu ja se sona ta tinzo mi rik thada ti ka gu de matuk de miti thoba ti mi ki yago che ma song chen ye ti kaya yo marwa mi kore rang gi chi karchi na timge de karchi na ti chongor matuk thobe mi thangma thamjelo di cheo marwa oti na chi tengi dos nuju mangbo yor nuju ti ko kale mangbo yor ta ka yo mares
yeah Khensur says that if you look in different schools of thought, different literatures, there's a lot of debates and refutation of those different positions, and some really they think a lot about this seriously, and then they thought that the thoughts are the real troublemakers, so therefore they think that the best way to get out of it is stop thinking completely. Okay. So they come to that conclusion. But the Rinpoche, as he said here, is that if we lose our critical intelligence in a very fine, refined manner, we can see that there are certain thoughts that need to be stopped. There are other thoughts, that need to be cultivated. And the example Rinpoche gives is, let's say, if a member of certain organization has done the most vicious thing, whatever, and then somebody might, make a proposition. What? We should ban that organization completely. Just because of one person's, right? Others say, no. We just need to deal with that one person, kick him out or whatever, put in the prison, but not the whole organization. So like that, some says, stop the thought completely. Others say, no, just look at which part, right? So all these debates, balance, Rana. Thank you for passing the mic,
Rinpoche, when talking about the obscurations to knowledge, and we talked about the latencies, that they're what's there to be removed, His Holiness last October in New York also talked that what happens between the 8th Bhumi and the 10th Bhumi is removing the appearance-making of intrinsic existence. So we're more working with the appearance of it. So
okay,
so
yes.
The question is, how's this coming together? Is it that the latencies are causing the appearance of intrinsic, or what is going on?
Okay. Yes, what's going on is the question. That again, you get to what the concern and you need to see the Chevasumba. The series said the Numongi and the Shabe Paxal Kuyabenarwa. I can sort of such Yabaku Jual Pangal Severwa, on the Zochigorwa. So the Konas, the Kazangema, and the Kundu in New York, Sunday Namalia, Shidip said, Muzina that's Mendo. The Shidip said, the any. That is Tenzin and Nawa, Nawa the any judge. This is the Gala the Numongi, Pagzagi, Shidip Gains and Tenzin Nawa Yakin go Tena
Pagzagi,
Shidiki Pagzagi Gains and the Tenzin Nawa Dingo, but the Numo bunch of own Sasa, and the Shidi Pagzag in the Tandet. Tenzin Shamba Menes, that now the Yorvesco.
Really, you're now you're Nina Thomas to give Nina Tomo. Tenzi Pazak Wonke, Rajam Button to Nina Tomo, Kalimala, Take Hiala, take Momo Trumpa Water, Louis Namju Chane and the two that Chompa Tonto Kangeti, Kari on Grace, and Tenzi Paza, you will on Gray. Now I think you did it, now I think you're now Karsana, Nina Tomo Yorba, Nina Tomo Tomo, you get. 예 뭐도 빵투기요 말아봐. 니나 참고 차든데 지게 됐던지 지게 와르지. Okay.
Yes, okay. Did you say that? Yeah. Yes, I think the imprints of the delusions, the latencies, yes, they can cause those subtle dualistic appearances. And that could only be removed on a very high level. You might be free of the grasping at intensive reality, but because of the imprints, you still could get. That's why sometimes we talk about some arahats, they can be a little wild sometimes. And we think, like, how can arahat, you be very subdued? Like, because of that, subtle dualism, sometimes that caused them, to do a bit of a weird things, I think. Let me put it that way. Yes. Yeah. Yeah.
Okay, so if
It is on, I think. Yeah. Yeah.
anyways, if we're the way of finding emptiness.
Yes.
What it means to us, simply understanding independent arising, and then in the 10 stages where we go through the obstacles that get in the way from us, and then also the imprints from other lives. And then if you come to what you feel is probably emptiness, would everybody agree that, because we're all doing it individually into our own selves, is it something that's individual into our own selves, or is it something that is a universal statement that is being said?
You mean, is the experience going to be universal or unique experience?
Yeah,
Is that
that's
okay?
right.
Yeah.
It seems like you don't say what it is, but
Okay.
you figure it out.
Okay. Yeah.
Universal.
Okay. 뭐라 간디 쉬어야 되리셔다 간제 간조 가르서고래 동반이리아 안에지 금쟁게 람네 등주스도 또다 되네 그 가서다 아데 디르와 등지디게 파 가라가 세두고이나 다 동이 무슨 또 차샤로 봐
리리리.
자 차면 다디 강사수 또 하면 그런 동행되게 냠뇨차대요 봐
리리.
근데 동이 가리네 다고 또데 냠뇨디 다디 잠블링 수도에네 그 냠뇨디 찍고지냐 차고래 양 강사들라 코레 괴주 믹세지 차더라 가르래서 동이 똑당이 다 냠뇨셔로 봐 라운디 대 상면 동이 또 다가라 냠뇨 찍고 차고래 야만 코코라 믹세를 차지로 봐
리리리. 다티 갈다. 지단에서 소토와도 이বার 리기 와라 봤다. 근데 가서 가면도 비 사비에는 메강게 가면도 사비에나. 나무 임버 찍바리. 나무 용톱티 찌기 용버 찍바리티. 야. 코레 미코레기 진주에 튀기 가게를 가면 기다 마도 안 잡고 찍다. 가게를 가면 비 탈투불 걸어야 하는 텐데 여러 봐. 근데 그 통남게 날에 빵자 가야로 이제 빵베게 동링고 좀또 윤디 발라. 아니 비게 지 간자 소소소 간자 팀부 멘타바 유는 마도 제가 찍줄이 돼. 찍바리죠 봐. 대 찍바니까 녀랑 좀도 떠비는 녀랑 마동이 또 용베이네야. 제가 제 탑진 잠이 되거니 지진 발로 뛰디 대 지기 릭베 그래 또당 대 릭베 남랑 시라라 매봐. 마 용적이 토네 지 조번라고 지 마도 되게 희귀 여러 가지 조번 또요 말이 다 하죠 노르주는 시 맞게 또당 찍버리 냠냠도 그 차리 냠냠 그 토네 랑기 류긴 줘야 탈 팀부기 객차번도 유나 마도 동징고 또 봐디 대 출라 슈샤 이시 대도 동반이 되고 예미 제니 인데 제니야 진짜 찍버리 찍버라와
No. What Khensur says is that in terms of experience itself, right, individual X, how to say, sees emptiness directly, non-conceptually at that stage, right? His or her experience that emptiness, and individual Y on the same stage, I think their experience of emptiness, it has to be same. In that sense, it's universal. But there could be sometimes slight variation in terms of the intensity of that experience, because individuals have different, life experience, the body element combinations. The example Khensur gives is like, if we all taste candy, we will all agree, let's say it's a sweet candy, not the one I always avoid that makes me water my mouth, very sour one. Let's say a sweet candy, yeah. So we experience sweet candy, we all agree it is sweet, right? But then some of you might get a little different flavor of sweet, isn't it? There's something to that sweetness. And then that's unique to that individual, right? We all agree it's sweet, but then some find it a little, sweeter or whatever that experience, So there could be some difference, slight variation in terms of intensity of the experience and things like that. Well, especially if you put it in the context of the 10 grounds, right? On the path of seeing, the first ground, we see emptiness directly. That's just amazing. Then we still have to go through the 9 grounds. So as we, remove other objects of abandonment, we might be able to see the emptiness, more clearly, or more clear is not the right word. We may be able to experience it more intensely as we go up the ladder. Yeah. Thank you. Okay, thank you very much. And now
Thank you.
Rinpoche says, he will soon make me jobless, I think. He'll speak English. Manjushri pray in Tibetan, and then a quick written, and then in English and Vietnamese. Lama do gombo jun jambe ya cha ze lo kangge lo de jin ye jin da nian da nam da rab se be qin ye dong gun ji xi si che ni je to ga le ba kang da si be zhen ra ma ri men dong dong ye ji se ro zo kun la bo ji da ze yan la zhou ji yang den song zhuo da che zhuo nian mo nian le ji jia zhuo zhe ze jie ma ri mun se dong ye niu wo qin ye jun ze ra ji yuan ne da ji sa ju ta shi yuan den lun zuo jia se tu yu ju zha zhu da zhu ni yan de da lu mun zhan bie yang
la
o ma ra ma zhen na Omara baza na de senden chuje tenra vese je talu timo memba rase tada denje shunlo toba ye loje ba zedo su denba nyame denjo se zanze lujo tome penjo chuden sha dibam kara yaje songa dende gele sebe pedo jo changjo nyimbo shebe shunla namda sudin sumje ledamde namjang choje nyamdo chebe pande lame shala sowa chudu chebe kera ledamde simje je sawa rimni nenjo lajebe losan yanden bebe pedo jo ningma ngaye rangdang chedenbe yingwe minsu dongwa dego yeden beze gundo shebe che yangzhe shenang bedo nyu jun sho. Manjushri in English. He who has the intuitive wisdom that disperses the clouds of the two obscurations, like the sun shedding a glorious light that is utterly pure. He who understands all meanings whatsoever, of perfect realization, from whose heart emerges the lotus holding the books of the perfection of wisdom. Those who live in samsara are the prisoners of ignorance, afflicted by the darkness of suffering, looking after all sentient beings with compassion, like a mother looking after an only child. You have a melodious voice of 60 tones. Roaring like a dragon, you wake people from the sleep of conflicting emotions, freeing one from the iron shackles of karma, dispelling the darkness of ignorance. Thus you wield the sword which cuts down the shoots of suffering. Primordially pure, having reached the 10th bodhisattva level, the perfect body of highest qualities, the foremost son of the Buddhas, adorned with 112 ornaments, major and minor physical perfections of a Buddha, I bow down to you, Manjushri. Please dispel the darkness of my mind. Om Arabhaza Nadi, I beseech you with the loving kindness of your omniscient light rays, to completely dispel the dark ignorance of my mind, thus giving me the intellectual courage and intelligence to understand the teachings of the Buddha, their elucidating treatises and commentaries. O peerless Savior, do hun den tan dang kong do to je Namo Dimam Kara Chung Song Ka Va Tong Fung Tu Fu Kong Lam Chung Tung He Tang He Tang Ban Tai Tu Ngui Ten Dang Da Lo Tu Chi Chen Dang King Dang Da Ka Nghe Đại Sư Vừa Đố Niệm Tu Bệ Giá Bạp Lộ Rồi Lại Phá Huệ Bá Đồng Tu Vị Bố Đề Hành Chánh Tông Sư Văn Khẩn Tu Chung Thân Đà Lô Sang Bệ Sư Mô Thô Lão Phong Lâm Giá Bạp Lộ Sang Bằng sư đái chạy đái còn nghiến mình thiên đồng tư vị rồi lại kháng thản tư bì đại người thiên chung đại hệ đủ cả mãn đồng lý phản chung đà thiên môn thông 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 lỗ bảo thông bảo thoại thông bi bảo phụ cháu đào cố người mãn đồng đưa tay giống mãi bảy ngày vẫn sinh năm ngày hết tương màu kháng sanh không trong Shungma sa nyama di sungju sab kyamru na yore be.
La kandi ina sungju
Ma da yana kyamru kora di nyama di sungju kyamru kora na shin tiro shin. Deshe kyongwe na.
deshe se chita ya yo mari ya jamne ja ju ro ba
La yamanen
no
kyamru na da ko deshe kyamru na yamando. Di nyama di kyamru kora na deshe kyamru yamando ro ba.
ha
Ma da kyamru jogo shin na de.
ani de ngat chu ne kyong yo mar ba
La de.
ro ba jamru che de che ne
La sha
ani di ki ku chok de tso mo kwa che
La de.
ro ba ta tu tu tong chang ma mo do mo che ne
Ta na shin ro ba.
ta tang go ya ma chi che pa de cham ne ten go ro ba ya chi
La
chu
de.
de
Des
ko
na
ba
nge sa pember chime ro ba.
re re
I have an announcement to make that next Sunday, I think Khensur Rinpoche has been requested to give a refuge, vows. So next Sunday, we will dedicate that Sunday morning for giving the refuge vows. He'll explain what it is. Yes, so those who probably requested, I'm sure they will come. And then Suyone Digorwa. Yeah, and then everybody is welcome, so long as maybe you want to refresh your refuge vows or, okay. 10:30, same, right? Same, yeah, we won't do the regular teaching, we'll just do the refuge vows and explain that, and then if we are done with that, we can call off early lunch or something for whatever works out. Okay, so thank you very much. Tenzin